You are now listening to Talk Your Jits podcast.
Later. This off. All right. Welcome back to the Talk Your Jits podcast. This podcast is, as the name implies, all about jiu-jitsu. I'm your host, Lamar Smith, and today's guest is a black belt who trains at Legends BJJ, located in Temple, Texas. Ladies and gentlemen, make sure I got this right. Davis Giadoo.
Yep, you got it right.
All right. How's it going, brother?
Good. How are you?
Pretty good, man. How's your morning so far?
So far, so good. I got my two kids with me, so hopefully they don't interrupt the interview. But yeah, so far so good. Just finished my workout, and then been studying some jiu-jitsu stuff in preparation for tonight's training session. So.
All right. Sounds good, man. Well, let's get the ball rolling. If you want to formally introduce yourself, by all means, and let's hear about your jiu-jitsu journey.
Well, my name is Davis Giadoo. I just got recently promoted to black belt in July of 2023, right? This past
Congratulations.
recent year. Thank you. I'm originally from the Northeast in York, Pennsylvania, which is an hour south of Harrisburg, the capital of Pennsylvania. So it's kind of like near the southern portion of the Pennsylvania-Maryland border. How I got started in jiu-jitsu. So when I was growing up, there was during like middle school, high school, there was a school that located right next to a Greyhound bus station, right? So every day I passed by going to school, and I'm like, oh, these a whole bunch of people fighting in a cage, wearing some like funky pajamas, right? It's like, I don't know, it's like a karate uniform. Mm-hmm. So I passed by here and there, peeking in, and I'm like, I don't have the funds to at the time to actually train. So in the summer of 2012, after I graduated from a community military college, right, I had 2 months to spare before I moved down to Georgia for further education. So I was like, you know what, I did some traditional, martial arts like Taekwondo, a little bit of boxing. And I was like, you know what? I need some ground game. So I finally went in, and the first person that introduced me to jiu-jitsu was my professor, Daniel Beleza, right, out of Fortaleza, Brazil, right, straight from the motherland. And, I was kind of nervous. I was like, all right, this is weird. There's no striking. There's, just takedowns, like grappling, like wrestling, right, minus the weird singlets and shoes, right? Right. So he sat me there, and he kind of explained to me like, all right, this is what jiu-jitsu is, which I kind of have a vague understanding, right, of like UFC and the typical understanding of what jiu-jitsu is, right, based off of that medium, right. He explained to me the contracts and whatsoever, right. I was like, okay. And I thought he would like just send me in and like just go at it, right. But at the first half of the class, he was like, hey, you're going to sit here, right, and just watch. I was like, okay. So then, they did their blocking instruction, they did their drilling, and then I was like, man, I don't think I'm going to go train today, right? So it's like a waste of time just sitting there. But then, fortunately enough, he was like, all right, we're going to go to our live rolling. So he started counting the heads, how many people are in there. And then, fortunately enough, that day, it was an odd number, right? So he pointed at me, and he was like, hey, do you want to roll? And I was like, oh, awesome, great. So I got there. He paired me up with a brown belt, same height, same size as me. And the brown belt asked me like, hey, do you know any techniques, anything? I was like, no, not really. He's like, okay, I'm going to lay on my back. So timer starts, boom. And then as a typical white belt, like day one, know nothing about jiu-jitsu concepts or like techniques at all, right? Just about like strength and athleticism. I went in, I like got him in side control. I kind of squeezed his head, right? Like a crossface underhook, right? Squeezing, doing my own like isometric workout for like 30 seconds. I gassed out, and I was like, I'm exhausted. And he looked up to me. He's like, are you done? I'm like, yeah, pretty much. He's like, all right, cool, my turn. Boom, he swept, like reversed me, pinned me, strangled me. And then at that moment, I was like, hey, I'm sold on this, So that was like my humble beginnings to introduction to jiu-jitsu.
Wow. So man, so given the fact that you're a black belt now, like when you go back and think about your first time rolling, because I always do that too. Like, what do you think about like when you as yourself now thinking about how you were when you first stepped on the mats?
Oh man, it's weird. It's like now, I wouldn't say like I comparing myself back then, I'm more mature in terms of mindset, technique, obviously, understanding of jujitsu and the application of jujitsu. And on top of that, also teaching jujitsu, right? Spreading the knowledge and learning how to distribute that information to others, right? In terms of like from now, then to now, I'm like, there was a lot of things that I learned in terms of how, at first it's all like I didn't know anything, and then over the years, it's like I learned that through like more of through mistakes and failures than success, right? Because a lot of people now you hear like, you know, like, hey, Gordon Ryan, right? He's like undefeatable, right? He's like 50 plus and 0, right? And in terms of like his winning streak, but people don't talk about like, yeah, he gets his ass whooped like all the time in training, right? And like it's those
Right.
moments of where there's trials and tribulation that matters the most, right? A lot of people don't talk about that because it's like they try to protect their ego, right? And then the cliche saying of in jiu-jitsu is like, hey, leave your ego at the door. So in a way, it kind of that's one key takeaway I kind of learned over the years is like how to manage the ego, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then what I usually say is like at first, I'm going down rabbit trail here, but like at first, as a white belt, it's like, oh, leave your ego at the door. So I mean, like whatever the leader or the teacher or coach would say, like, hey, that's like his word is gospel, right? In a way. But over time, through my own experience, I kind of realized like you do need some ego, right, to bring to the mats as you're rolling, as you're training. But I would kind of call it like I kind of termed it as disciplined ego, right? So instead of having your ego take control of you, right, you have take control of that ego of like, hey, I need the willingness to kind of go in and like not be a dead fish, so to speak, or like somebody that when somebody rolls with, they're not gonna like beat me, right? I'm not gonna concede positions. I'm not gonna accept, a takedown from somebody, right? I'm gonna make them work for it, right? And I'm gonna make myself work hard to like not be in those positions and like kind of fight for it, fight positions, right? And that kind of helps me out due to the fact like over the years, kind of like through competitions and mindset that it kind of helped me out, So
Yeah, I like that concept of what you said about Gordon Ryan. Yeah, the fact that he's like undefeated in tournaments, but yeah, no one ever realized how many losses he took to get that good. So yeah, so having your
right.
ego in check is definitely a piece of advice I give everybody. Like egos are checked as soon as you walk in the door. Because that's the only way I feel like you would be able to like grasp and learn jujitsu is understand that the possibilities that you will be the weakest link sometimes on the mat. Sometimes you have your days where you are the strongest. You just have to be able to learn and understand that and yeah, like buy into what jujitsu really means.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I had this epiphany the other day when in the past I was like, oh, how you have your good days and then you have your bad days, right? So like yesterday I
Mm-hmm.
did my rolling session, right? And it kind of hit me, right? Like 11 years of doing jujitsu, and then like finally at this moment in time in my journey in jujitsu, I kind of realized like there's no such thing as good days or bad days. It's like as long as you go in with the willingness of like, hey, I have something to work on and I'm striving for it, regardless of like how emotional I get, there's no good days or bad days, right? As long as you have the intent of like, trial and error, right? And if you succeed or not succeed, like you're working towards something, right? So that I kind of like that kind of lit flicker, a light in my head. I'm like, oh man, there's no such thing. So that's like one key takeaway I kind of learned yesterday to kind of like teach other, lower belts to like, hey, today you felt like you be the nail versus the hammer, but as long as you're like consistently striving for something, then there's no good days or bad days. It's just a day of training. So
Yeah. And that's something that I like to relate to my students too. Like you will be the nail more so often than you are the hammer. So just take your lumps and keep getting better. Just keep growing.
Yeah.
All right, so yeah, so you've been doing this for like 11 years. So I've only been doing this for 6. But what are some of the things that you've noticed change in like the aspect of jujitsu from the time you started until like now?
So I would say just two things, right? It's like the uh, the meta, right? The most effective techniques available at the time, and the pedagogy, like the way of teaching and conveying information, right? So to start off, like the meta, right? Like what I remember when I started this back in the summer of 2012. It was like Baron Bowls, right? That was like the thing, right? For like uh, short stature people like myself, right? That was like the thing. And then we started progressing forward a little bit, and in more of the gi aspect, it was like Warm Guard, right? With Keenan Cornelius with his little lapel, wizardry. And then it went from that, and then into the leg locks, right? Which was like where I kind of exploded in my own personal journey through jiu-jitsu in terms of leg locks and in the no-gi setting. And then from there to now, it's more like wrestle ups, right? Instead of like wrestling, both individuals on the feet, right? And trying to wrestle the individual down, is more like, hey, it's okay. I can pull guard and I can wrestle up in order to take the person down, right? That was like the last meta I saw. And then now it's more of taking, counter leg locking and like taking the back from there, right? So this is where I see now is like the latest meta, what I've seen in jiu-jitsu, not only in the in the classroom setting, the school setting, and then also in the highest level, like you see on like flow grappling, for example, right? That's the first part. The second part is the pedagogy, right? Of how to teach. So this is where I'm kind of particularly interested and passionate about at the moment. So growing up through the ranks, right, from white belt to brown belt, it's just a basic typical model that you see in most of jiu-jitsu schools, right? It's going to be maybe starting with a warm-up, as in like running around the mats, jumping jacks, shrimping, doing shots of penetration steps across the mat and back, to the block of instruction. And then once that block of instruction is done, then you do your drilling a little bit, right? And then rinse and repeat. And then finally it's like either situational rounds or live rolling, right? So that's like the typical model that I grew up in. And then now, through my own research, now it's more like there are other methods of teaching, whether it's the reverse classroom model, where it's like instead of an instructor teaching like one thing and then everybody will just copy and drill that specific movement or technique or concepts, it's more like, okay, so for homework or assignments, each individual research on their own time, and then bring in the next day or next time they train, we gather around and we'll talk about like, this person is trying to work on, like, for example, like reverse De La Hiva, right? Or this one person is trying to work on taking the back, and then they'll work from there. That methodology I don't use at all. I don't favor it. And then the one method that I really like to use now, and it's kind of like, I would say like woo-woo, because it goes against like the traditional training model, like I mentioned earlier, right? It's the ecological approach or the constraint-led approach. It's more scientific, based around the kind of like the professional sports arenas. So like Penn State wrestling, they use it. Baseball teams use it. Softball teams use it in order to kind of convey the information, to have the players, the people that do the sport, kind of adapt and learn faster in their knowledge within their sport, right? A great example is this individual named Greg Sodders. He's a black belt that trains out of Maryland, and his teaching methodology, he's based it upon this constraint-led approach or ecological approach, and which he teaches all his students, right? So there's no drilling at all. Everything's taught based on games, right? So easy way to kind of visualize this is imagine like specific training, right? So everybody across the board knows some sort of form of what specific training is, right? Hey, person top or bottom has a goal to do something, right? prime example would be like, a person on top is going to pass, person on bottom is trying to prevent the pass, right? And try to get into like an open guard, a closed guard of some sort, right? And then they go from there. Mm-hmm. So the ecological approach or the constraint-led approach is basically like, hey, it's kind of like that, except it's more refined and constrained, right? So let's say the person on top has the goal of like, for passing is, hey, he or she needs to make a hand connection here on the hips and have to split the legs and go, and pass from there, right? The person on bottom needs to like keep their feet in front and guard and like retain guard using like certain things like connection of 2 feet into the inside or framing or something like that. So it's kind of a way I kind of teach now. And going back to your question, these are the kind of like the 2 things that I've seen change over time. So.
Yeah, that's a very, very intriguing way of approaching teaching jiu-jitsu. Because like the more and more you're talking about it, I'm like, okay, that's kind of like, it's more so like they're trying to find their own way, but they have like scenarios they have to kind of like go through as well. Like you say, like, hey, we want you to pass guard, but you have to split, split the guard, block the hip, yada, yada, yada. But you still kind of have to go off on your own merit on figuring out how to do all that. If I understood
right.
that
so
right.
Yeah, you're correct. So basically it does 2 things, right? For one is it destroys the concept or like the negative concept of dead drilling, right? So it's like going back, taking the basic traditional model of like, okay, once we've done the blocking instruction, the person, right, the Tori or the person doing the technique is doing it on the uke, right, or demonstration partner that doesn't do anything, right? It's like, and you see this like 99% on all jiu-jitsu schools across the world, right? It's like, okay, person's doing the action, he'll do the action, he or she will do the action. The person on bottom or in that certain position is like, okay, I'm going to be a limp noodle. I'm not going to give 0 resistance. And then it kind of gives the person that's doing the move a false sense of like confidence and like, hey, I got this move down, right? But then when you put it in a live scenario, when they try to do it move for move, it's like, okay, now this variable comes out of nowhere. They're blocking in a certain way, or this happens, or like it throws everybody off because now they're like, oh, I drew this with 0 resistance. The variables are coming out of nowhere. And then now they're not, like their body is not adapted to adjusting, right? Being adaptive. So that's number 1. Number 2 is that, going to my second point, is with the constraint-led approach or the ecological approach, it allows the person drilling or doing the movement be adaptive, right? So in the case where they don't do the move or the technique, like, move for move, at least they know how to kind of adapt on the fly, right? Kind of grasp those concepts and then go from there, right? An example I always use is like, person on top is, in the game is their task is to pass, right? Their focus is, hey, they're going to have, hands on their hips, inside control. They're going to split the legs, right? They're going to have control the inside space between their opponent's legs and go pass from there, right? So now instead of like, all right, we're going to do a knee cut pass, they're going to have, these concepts. So now when they go live, right, outside of the games that they play or specific training, these variables that comes out of nowhere. So regardless of like, they're not, they don't know how to do knee cut pass, at least they know the concept, like, okay, so as long as I have control, on the hips, pitting their legs, pitting top, the top body. Now I can actually like do, the passes, right? Any type of pass, as long as they have those type of concepts in mind, and it allows them to be adaptive.
Yeah, I really like that. I did try something like that for a class. I had a guy who was working guard passes, and I didn't necessarily teach him how to do a guard pass. I just gave him the concept of a guard pass. Like, like you said, split the guard, get from his guard to side control. Do that. And it was, you could tell it was very awkward for him because he's like, I don't know any techniques. I don't understand what you mean by that. But I'm like, all you have to do, get past his legs, get your body on this side, yada, yada, yada. And surprisingly, he was really able to figure it out pretty quickly versus, given a structured technique like, okay, this is the type of guard we're going to pass. Obviously, both parties is listening to it. So it's like, yeah, if you want to rep this in a live role, your opponent kind of already have an idea of what you're going to go for, because like, yeah, typically if you're in a class, you learn a technique and you go for a roll, you usually kind of go for the move you just kind of learn because it's fresh in your mind. And then the other person who's already in the class sees that too. So it's like, oh man, why is this not working? Or why is this not, I did everything right. Why can't I get it? But yeah, it's because of how it's, actually, how it's taught.
Right. So that kind of for me, seeing also the evolution as well, going back to the question of like the things I've seen going from white belt to now, right? So in addition to the metas, right, the techniques and the teaching methodology, it's more like how the stuff that's being taught, right? So at first it's more like, all right, we're gonna teach techniques, and then it's up to the onus is on the students to be like, okay, I know these techniques, now I gotta piece it together. Now, and then the next evolution was like, okay, we're teaching sequences, right? So instead of teaching one or two techniques that doesn't even like relate to each other, right? Or there's a bridge or a missing gap between the two, right? There's a missing bridge. Right now it's like, okay, we're going to teach, techniques that actually tie together. So now instead of the student having just one or two techniques that they have to figure out how to relate to each other, they have one sequence, right? Kind of like a recipe from a book where they're like, okay, you just go from next step to next step to next step, right? To next technique, from one technique to the next technique to the next technique. Now it's more of conceptual, where now it's like, okay, there's the person, the black belt that's, doing the ecological approach in Maryland, he states that there's no such thing as techniques. That's why he doesn't teach them, right? He's more teaching like just concept based, right? So that way the individual that's, learning through this approach can actually adapt and kind of do it on the fly, right? So because they're adapted to the environment that's present in front of them. So now it's more like I teach just the concepts of, I still teach techniques, but at the end of the day, I really emphasize on the concepts, right? So I keep, telling my students like, hey, at the end of the day, if you don't get the moves move for move, or like the details, as long as you get the concept, you're good to go, right? Just remember that. And then once you're, trying to learn and your body becomes adapted to it, then you start opening up techniques or sequences that I never taught. And it's beneficial for you because it's for you. So that's why I've seen through, the evolution from starting as a white belt to now.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to adapt some of those concepts because I like that. I like that way of thinking. It's it kind of gets out of the cookie cutter, like you said, of just like, okay, we're gonna rep this one technique the whole entire class, and then you kind of just move on to the next class from there. Versus, like you said, just giving them a concept of how everything works and letting them find it how it works for them for themselves, and they're, like you said, in their own game.
Right.
Yeah, pretty cool. So do you compete, or have you, well, I know you said you competed before, but are you like, how can I put this? Are you currently active in competing like now?
So I am. So in about 3 weeks or so, I'm doing a super fight, potentially a super fight, right? If the person accepts or not. In kind of, I think it's an hour or so from San Antonio, under the grappling sports coverage, right? And it's on Flow Grappling. So I've been doing like more super fights, right? And then the local tournaments like Naga, AGF. What I'm hoping to do is a couple of months from now is once the ADCC opens, comes around Texas, then I'll probably like jump in on that as well, because I have never done it before, and that's like one of my goals that I wanted to achieve of this new year.
Nice. So which one do you prefer? Do you prefer tournaments, or do you prefer just the super fights?
So it depends, right? So basically, if it's my focus is on skill acquisition, skill development, I would do tournaments, right? Not the major tournaments, but like the local tournaments like Naga, AGF. That way it kind of helped me it's a litmus test, right? I know a lot of instructors out there, they would say like, hey, I don't promote students based on people like competing. I personally think like if you don't go out there and like put your skills to against a person that you have never met before, someone who's unknown, and like kind of test your skills out, you won't see for yourself like have you improved or not, right? Of course, you see it
Mm-hmm.
if you roll in with the same people over and over again in the school, but when you go out and test your skills against an unknown opponent or unknown person, yeah, I think that's how you kind of develop, kind of reflect on if you're what you're working on is that works or not, right? And then in terms for super fights, I kind of like doing those because one, sometimes it gets some like monetary incentives, right? And then two is the atmosphere and the energy, that you get from being on the stage under, the bright lights with the music, the walkout music. You go in and it's just you, your opponent, a ref, and then yeah, you can go from there. So it makes you feel like kind of like you're in a UFC fight or like WWE or like in this like celebrity atmosphere, right, or setting. So I kind of like that's the reason why I like to do those.
Oh, okay. Yeah, 'cause like I haven't done a super fight yet. I really haven't really thought about it, but I have done tournaments and just the aspect of loan of just like you know who your opponent is. You might be able to look them up, maybe not, but like your focus is just that one match versus being in a tournament where you get there, you don't know when your match time is, you don't know who you're going up against, you don't know if it's the weight, none of that stuff. It's just kind of like you just throwing your hand in the cookie jar and hope you grab something good. But as far as like competing in a whole, I was like that too, where it's like I don't really care about tournaments and stuff like that. Still kind of don't. If the student wants to do it, then by all means. But yeah, I do feel like someone who's doing jujitsu should compete at least once. It don't have to be every single belt rank, but at least once, so that way you can kind of, like you said, get an idea of where your skills at, where you feel that your jujitsu lasts. I mean, where your jujitsu kind of like ranks at. And I can say for sure that the couple students that I did have compete, including myself, their mindset in jujitsu has completely changed from the time they were just, doing it as a hobby to becoming, to competing for the first time. And then, like, how they approached jujitsu after that was just like almost like night and day. And it just dawned on me when you were saying that, like, yeah, I think you should at least do one tournament to kind of see where you are and whatnot, and you can kind of build from there.
Yeah, and I totally agree with what you said. Because there's a lot of times I've seen students, they would just train, right? They never competed before. They like train and focus on honing one technique, and then they're like, oh, this technique really works because it gets everybody in the gym. But then all of a sudden, when they go for the tournament, it's just like they go with somebody who they never rode before, and then boom, their technique just get crushed because they had that false sense of like, oh, this technique works and it is like a technique I'm going to live by. But then when they go out and have that reality check, right, that litmus test is like, it doesn't work, right? And then it's like, if I haven't gone out there, if the person didn't go out there, then they would have never known like, oh, this technique doesn't work, or it techniques need some refinement, right? And you wouldn't know if you just don't go outside your comfort zone. And then I also agree
Mm-hmm.
on, you know, saying how like when the person that did it, just roll into school, right? They roll one certain way, but then post competition when they finally did it, right? You see like a night, like you said, a night and day of like how they roll, and I see that all the time. So the school I train at is a competition based school, and you know
Okay.
we have a lot of competitors, so it's we see night and day of like when the first person that they're doing a trial class or in a couple months doing jujitsu, they haven't done a tournament, right? They kind of roll like a certain way, right? But then when they go with a competitor like myself or my other people that compete, man, it's like we just crush, right? We just like crush them, not because we're like being assholes, but that's the way we roll, right? Because we're like veteran of the sport, right? It's like we're battle tested, battle hardened, battle tested, right? I would say that compared to somebody who's green and just like, oh, I just roll against these people like, oh, he's my friend or she's my friend. Against somebody who's instead of like, I'm gonna try to rip your limb off or your head off, you know what I mean? And I see that too. Like the moment we say, hey, I recommend you compete, right? And then they're like, okay. And then the moment they do their first tournament, it's like, oh, I don't know why I didn't do this in the first place or early on, right? And then once they come back to the next day, the next training session, they roll exactly how they competed, right? Like just that intensity and like, rolling as someone who there's like, it's like an actual fight, right? Versus somebody who's like, all right, I'm gonna chillax and like just do this as a hobby and like not give any, any resistance and just like keep it playful, right? Jiu-jitsu versus like competitive jiu-jitsu. If you just want to label that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And while you were talking, I was thinking about one of our students. He just got his purple belt last week, right before the holiday. And I remember he was like, I won't do tournaments. I don't care for them. But he went out there and did one. And the whole time that he was, that was leading up to the tournament, he was like, yeah, man, I've been studying this. I've been doing this. I want to try this and, whatnot. And, if he just coming up with all these different scenarios and how things will, how he would try to, how things will play out and stuff like that. And it's like, damn, that's really such an improvement that you don't even realize, because you'll usually come to class, you talk to everybody, work the whatever the lesson plan is, and then you leave or whatever. But like I said, leading up to it and even up to now, like he's taking more notes. He's like, asking more questions. He like I said, he came up with his game plan that he wanted to work for his tournament. And right after the tournament, boom, we watched the tape. Like, we watched his matches and it was like, okay, this is what we need to work on, blah, 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 blah. And like I said, great improvements since he did that.
Yeah, for sure. And also like the aspect of like doing a tournament, okay, competition, right? It not only everybody thinks of like, all right, just show up and then go from there, right? Like the physical aspect, but there's also, the mental aspect, right? And also the tournament preparation as well, in terms of like, hey, if you want to go to a certain weight class, but you're like a pound or two off or like 5 pounds off, right? It's like you have to manage your weight. And there's these little aspects of like certain like little disciplines that you need to, enforce in order to compete, right? So using the competition or a tournament as a platform to to kind of focus on honing or developing a better areas of your life as well. So whether it's meal planning, strength and conditioning, watching tape, visualization, meditations, all that stuff. It comes out of like the preparation or the willingness to do a tournament or a competition.
Yeah, definitely, because it's a whole different a whole different atmosphere, a whole different beast. Because you're so used to rolling with this, the 7 to 10 guys that you roll with on the daily, to you're in a foreign land, everyone's watching you, nothing about who you about to roll with. And yeah, like you said, that lead up to it, like, if you serious about it, that your meal prep and the way you train, the way you handle yourself leading up to it, because for a fact that that other person is not just sitting around doing nothing. He's going after it, he's getting ready. And you like, okay, well, I know for a fact if my opponent is preparing, I need to prepare too. So like you said, watching tape, watching techniques, getting your mind, getting yourself mentally together, as well as getting more physically together, versus then you just showing up to the gym, blah blah blah. Like, yeah, you're watching what you eat, you're staying a little bit later in the gym. So it's a lot of stuff that goes on to it than just, hey, sign up, show up, and just roll.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. So Legion this is a school that you've been with since you started jujitsu.
No, so like I mentioned earlier, so I started in Pennsylvania, right, with a team
Right. Okay.
called
Yeah.
SAS Team,
Okay.
and then from there, since being in the military, right, I had to go like from place to place to place, right, based on like my job at the time. So Pennsylvania, and then I went down to Georgia for college, and then from then I was with Gracie Baja for a long time. So from Georgia, like North Georgia, to where I went for college, right? And then from there, I got I went from North Georgia down to further south to another Gracie Baja school, and then I trained there for a little bit, and then I got orders from Georgia to go to Colorado. So when went to Colorado, trained there for a little bit, and then I got orders to come back to Georgia, so I went to train in the same location I was previously, and then finally from there, I got orders to come to Texas, and that's where I started training at Legends. So.
Okay. Okay. So what rank was you about when you got to Legends?
So I was a brown belt. So I was a newly promoted brown belt, and
Okay.
then yeah, yeah, and it's kind of funny. It's my previous professor. He promoted me. So I was like a three stripe purple belt, and I was expecting the day that I got promoted just to get a stripe, right? Because obviously you're not gonna like unless it's like special occasions or certain circumstances, then obviously you're gonna like skip stripes or skip a belt or whatever. But he promoted me to brown belt, and he told me afterwards the reason why he promoted me was he was afraid that if I go anywhere else under the assumption of the previous, or sorry, the new my new coach or professor would be like, oh, you had this belt and these stripes from somebody else, but you're not with me, so I'm gonna remove all your stripes and you gotta start over again, right, at that specific belt. So because of that fear, he was like, hey, I think I'm gonna give you your brown belt, not because of the fear, but like you actually earn it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that was kind of like the starting point of like, okay, he's afraid that all that hard work that I have done will just go up for nothing because some new place I'm in or some new guy that he don't even know me. So
Yeah, that's kind of like that's always been a fear of mine. Because I've been training at the same school since I started jujitsu, but just the idea of going somewhere else and knowing the fact, knowing that you're skilled, knowing you're capable, what you're capable of, but you have to convince that new school. You have to convince that new instructor that you earn that purple belt or you earn them stripes. So yeah, I can see where your instructor's coming from because he don't want you to, you know, feel like you haven't earned that, you know. But yeah, that's just I don't know. I guess I never really thought about it a lot to like fully understand where it's like yeah, if I'm coming from another school and I'm a certain type of rank and it may take you another 2 to 3 years before you get recognized there versus the um the route that you was on at your own school. But I guess because they're more familiar with you than whatnot. But yeah, that's always been like a grave fear of mine of going to another school and having to wait so long to get recognized for the skill that I've already obtained where I was at.
right. Yeah, it's funny because as a black belt, I kind of realized over time, like, from a white belt, blue, purple, brown, I'm like, I know I'm gonna get my next belt. I'm gonna get my next belt, right? We're like all chasing this materialistic thing, right? This coveted piece of fabric that covers, our waist. And then now as a black belt, I think like, hey, the belts don't even freaking matter, right? I know a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people be like, hey, you're a black belt. You can say that because you achieved your coveted black belt, blah, 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 right? But I'm like, no, like, listen, right? So prime example, right? And I say this so many times when people are like, oh, you can say that because you're a black belt, but I'm just a white belt. I want a blue belt, blah, blah, blah. But I'm like, no, it doesn't matter. The belt doesn't matter. It's a skill set that you have, right? So I can't remember which Gracie said it, but it's like the whole purpose of a belt is to cover 2 inches of your ass, right? It's like it doesn't matter when you get into an altercation in the street. The belts don't even matter, right? It's like it's the skill set they have on hand right then and there that matter.
Yeah, that was Chris Hodder. Chris Hodder said
and,
that. Yeah.
Yeah, and another good example like that person from my personal experience is so we have at Legends, right? We have this phenom, right? His name is Hunter. He's been doing this for 2 years, and he recently got promoted to purple belt, right? He's like 20 years old, and he like kills everybody, right? He like even beats me up, right? And he's amazing, right? And just because he's not, he doesn't have a black belt or whatever, right? He's like he has the skill set to beat black belts, and that I always tell people that personal experience of mine, that little vignette of mine, to show like, hey, it doesn't matter the belts, right? The belts, like you can be a white belt, but as long as you have the skill set and the understanding and the maturity and just train and to acquire that quality of skills as a black belt, man, you go to roll with a black belt, and one day you might just beat them. You know what I mean? Like at a faster rate versus like waiting 10 years and then be a black belt going against a black belt, right? So it kind of goes back to like the methodology of teaching as well. So that's what we see a lot at my school. It's like we see blue belts that go to other schools and like just beating up purple belts and sometimes brown belts because it's the quality of training and of knowledge and the conveyance of those information to those students, right? And how they kind of use it to their, within their capabilities in order to roll with other people, right? And we see across the board, like all this during this past holidays, like we have people that usually trains on a regular at our school will, go to their hometown or back to their home state or whatever. And they say like, hey, there's nothing, it's so special about our school that when they go back to roll with people they rolled with before, it's just like with people that they actually were unstruggling with, trying to tap or to submit. Now they just breeze them through like nothing, and it goes back to, the quality of your training, the conveyance of the information, and who's teaching it and how they're teaching it to make them better, right? Kind of like a long-winded answer, but yeah.
No, I got you. But that's a philosophy that I try to distill into anybody I talk to when it comes to jiu-jitsu. Don't chase colors, don't chase stripes. Just trust in the process, because if everyone starts that way. Everyone starts like you started something new, and you're seeing people around you getting stripes and promotions, and you want to feel that like, man, I can't wait till I get my blue belt or whatever. And I have to admit I was like that too at first, but I think once I got to like maybe like mid blue, I kind of didn't care anymore. It was kind of like I love this. I love this martial art. I'm loving what it's done for me physically, mentally, emotionally, and stuff like that. So it's like, the colors will change eventually, and that's all comes with time. But we had a conversation with with a fellow student. Well, I guess he was a training partner, student, or whatever. And he was saying like, hey, realistically, when do you think I should be testing for my brown belt? And we were being honest with them, and we were just saying like, dude, it won't be no time soon because you haven't been training. Just because you've been at a certain rank for 3-4 years doesn't automatically signify that you deserve the next rank. Like, are you showing up to class? Are you paying attention? Are you showing up? Are you learning and teaching from the underbelts? Like, what are your mat etiquette? Like, there's a lot of this stuff plays into factor then versus just saying, yeah, I've been this belt for X amount of years, so I deserve the next one. And I guess the example that I gave him was like, that's like you getting a job, not going to work, but you still expect to get paid every Friday. Doesn't work that way. You have to put the work and time in to get what I guess you say you feel like you deserve. But I guess that wasn't the answer that he wanted to hear, but it's the truth. It's the truth.
Right. Sorry, you mentioned test that individual said testing for your belt. So do your school kind of do that route?
Yep. Yep.
Okay. Okay. Have you seen, not kind of going off a rabbit trail here, but have you seen like Roy Dean and his testing and all that on YouTube and whatnot?
No, I haven't. I haven't.
Yeah.
No, I
So
haven't. No.
if you, and it's for for everybody out there, like Roy Dean, his student, he's a student of Roy Harris, which is like one of the people that learned directly under one of the Gracies for a little bit, and he kind of curtailed like each, like your school is each belt has a specific testing, right? And then what he highlights on YouTube mostly is when the brown belt, selects to do his testing, and which is like a couple hours, coming from like, hey, just show certain techniques, and then like they gotta tie in like 10 techniques in a row, and then they go from like specific training, right, or specific position to like actual live rolling, and it's pretty cool. It's pretty awesome to see. So
you know what? I've seen I think his name is Peter. Yeah, one of the students named Peter. I watched his black belt test. But that's kind of what we do for our testing, where we have our rules and philosophies that we follow in jiu-jitsu, and then we have to demonstrate techniques from different positions. We have to do a self-defense portion of the test, and we also do a sports jiu-jitsu portion at the ends, where it's like you're tired from self-defense, you're tired from doing all the techniques, you're tired from doing all this. Now you have to roll, so that way you can't rely on strength. You just your will to fight and that grit is what's going to get you through the rest of your test.
Okay, I gotcha. Yeah, the first school I was at, they do kind of something like that, but at that time, like by the time I left, like I never got a chance to actually like do that specific type of testing. So I just been promoted through the I would say the traditional way of like from the assessment of your professor, basically, without an official testing of like or official assessment of some sort. So
right, but that's because I'm not used to being at big schools, so I'm just trying to like figure out how does an instructor truly knows the capabilities of each student. If you have like 20 to 30 people on the mats at a time, like how do you keep up with trying to figure out who's ready for that next rank?
Yeah, it's funny because one of my goals in the future, whether it's near or far, is like to actually own a school, right? And again, like this is one of the questions I kind of ponder about a lot. It's like how do I assess my students when it's time for them to go from the next rank or the next to earn the next stripe or whatever, right? And I asked my professor, my coach right now, like, what does he do? So what he told me, right, what he does is two things. Well, one is he personally rolls with them, right? And then he'll do his own personal assessment. And then also the second thing is he'll usually ask the higher belts, right? Like, hey, has this individual, is he ready? If he or she is ready for the next belt, yes or no, and why? Or the other way around is, obviously, like you said, there's like a lot of students on the mats. Like, how can you able to know, like, hey, he or she is ready? There are sometimes like higher level or higher belts will come up to my professor, like include myself, like, hey, like this individual really needs to be go to the next rank because he is at that moment already. He's at that stage in his jiu-jitsu journey that he needs to do it, right? And then from there, it'll be like, yeah, I hope he or she gets promoted or not, but that's like a way that I have learned from my professor that's how he does it. But
yeah, I mean, I kind of got the general idea of just thinking about that, like you're obviously you're an instructor, but you also have upper rank students that you kind of like depend on as as your seconds to kind of like help with the class. But yeah, it's like, to me, I feel like it would just get very confusing sometimes, or like you'll just get so lost in it where it's like you got 40 people on this mats and you're trying to remember not only their names but skill set and what this person needs to work on and all the other stuff. Like I'm comfortable with maybe having like 10 to 12 students, this because that's what I'm used to at my school, but just having like that large school and trying to like figure out where everyone's at, that can be so daunting what it sounds like.
Yeah. Yeah. And also another way too is like if they're competitors, it's like if they're gonna place on a podium or not, right? Like there's two things. It's like either one is did they place, right? And then two is where they place. So it's kind of a way to kind of assess as well, kind of narrow it down like that. One of the criteria is like, hey, is this individual ready to move up or not? So
Gotcha. So many ways. Just like you said, just depends on the school. Because do your school do they do stripes or just straight belt, belt ranks?
They do stripes as well, but I think for me personally, if my mindset is if when I open my own school is there shouldn't be any stripes, period, right? It's just the belts in general. The reason being is I kind of learned the history of like where the origin of these where the belt system comes from, right? And then like where the origin of these stripes come from. Obviously, we kind of took it from judo, right? And then judo didn't have any stripes. The introduction of stripes came from, like the commercialization of the martial arts, right? Of like, hey, we're gonna, as in a business aspect, it's like, hey, we're gonna keep encouraging these Americans to like try to come back, right? Because like if we don't give them anything, an incentive, they're never gonna come back or they're not motivated. So it's like, oh, he's a piece of tape, a piece of freaking tape around your little belt, so you can be like, oh yeah, I did something, right? And then you get all more excited. But for me, I think it's like it's a double-edged sword because if you get the stripe, now you're like using that as a measuring stick, right? A criteria of like comparing yourself to other people, which you shouldn't do at all, right? So like a great example is a tournament, right? I hear a lot of students, and I have my own personal experience of like, if it's in the gi, right? We wear belts in the gi. You go up, you go see this like, I'm a blue belt, and you see a guy who's like a 4-stripe blue belt. You're like, oh, then you get self-doubt, like, I don't, I just got promotionally promoted. He's, to blue belt. He's probably about to be promoted to purple belt. There's like a huge skill gap. Like, I don't know what to do now, right? Versus like, if you just get rid of the stripes and you're just like, I don't know where I'm at, but I know I'm confident in my own skill set. And then you're like, then you kind of remove that kind of like self-doubt, right? Or even the opening to you having self-doubt. So that's kind of my mindset, but we'll see. I see, I mean, this is my mindset as a competitor and a teacher, but I haven't been to the business aspect yet of jiu-jitsu. So this is where I kind of have to like figure out on my own, whether to incorporate stripes or not.
Yeah, it's a motivational piece. It's not like, it's going to change much. If you get one stripe, if a person has one stripe or two stripes or four, because not everyone gets, they get that, I guess, that promotion at the same time. Like you said, you go to a tournament and, you just got your blue belt and this person's a 4-stripe blue belt. You don't know how long that person been a 4-stripe blue belt. They could have took a break. Right. They could have they could have stopped training. They could have not progressed far enough to get that next rank. So you never know. But that's why I personally kind of like like going to open mats and stuff like no-gi, because if people don't know my rank, I don't have that to worry about them feeling intimidated when they find out what belt rank I am. Because if I show up in a colorful rash guard, you don't know if I'm a blue, purple, brown, black belt, and I don't know what you are. So I'm just gonna go by your, but off your skill set. Like if you, if we're going, and then if I notice some stuff that you're not doing, I can kind of assess like, okay, he may be a lower rank. But if he's doing some like very calculated stuff, I'm like, okay, he might be mid to high rank and so on and so forth. But yeah, it's just like someone sees that belt and it's like, uh-oh, I'm brother with a black belt. Like, don't think that, Don't look at it like that. Yeah, you're rolling with a
Yeah.
jujitsu practitioner, just like how you a jujitsu practitioner. Think of it that way and have fun.
And then also like with the stripes, it's also like if you go some of the schools where they count your attendance, not the quality of your training, but how many times you've been at training, right? It's like, okay, you've been at, and it's like blah, 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 and it's like boom, 4 stripes all of a sudden, right? But then you have this guy who's, let's say a recently promoted blue belt, just grinding it day in and day out, right? And it's like, okay, he's not getting the stripes, but then we go in a tournament, he's just mauling this dude who supposedly has better skills because of the appearance of having 4 stripes, right?
Right.
So yeah, like I really enjoy like I kind of had this epiphany a while back of like, no matter it's kind of it sounds kind of rough, but no matter if it was a white belt or a black belt, like, or beginner, I wouldn't say white or black belt, let's say if it was a beginner or even a freaking world champion, I roll the same way with everybody, right? And I'll bet if it's a male or female, I'm not gonna go like using all strength against a female, but I still like roll as though my mindset as I roll as though it's a world champion, no matter what. Because if you have that false mindset of like, oh, this guy looks, he's skinny, right? And it's like, oh, he looks like he have never done jiu-jitsu a day in his life. Yeah, that false assumption of like, oh, he's probably the freaking free trials class guy. But then you realize he's like the next Mikey Musumeci, and you're just like, oh, like that. See, then you get screwed, right? So for me, I'm like, no, screw that. I don't care who you are. I roll my jiu-jitsu, and then you just got to figure it out on your own, Some people are like, you should ask him because if you smash him, he might be the new guy. And he's like, I don't like this. But I'm like, hey, it's kind of selfish because, well, one, I'm a competitor, and most competitors are kind of selfish, right, to their own training. So I'm like, hey, like, it's not my problem. It's the individual that I roll with's problem. Like, hey, if you want to stay with it, fine. Just don't blame it on me. Like, there's other people you can roll with, right? So I just go everybody, and I just like, in the words of Khabib, I smish, right? Like I just do that, right? So yeah, that's the mindset. Like, going back to like stripes, right? Like I don't care. Like I assess you as, like you said, like a jiu-jitsu player, whether you're brand new or you're like a 10-time world champion. I roll the way how I'm supposed to roll, like just jiu-jitsu, right? So
yes, like you said, I smish. I don't like you said, I don't care for whatever rank you are. If you want to roll, we're gonna roll. I'm not the type of person to really like just turn up just on a whim. If me and you're going and I notice you starting to turn up, I'll say, okay, now it's time for me to start to turn up. But yeah, other than that, man, it's like, hey, we're both doing the same thing. Let's just go out there and just kick each other's butt and go home. So
yeah. I mean, there are times where I'm like, I kind of see like if I'm working on something, right? And then if this new guy is like trying to turn up the heat and he just like throws a reap in or some sort out of nowhere or trying to heel hook me, right? And it's like, okay, now you want to play, like, oh, now you're going to be really serious, then I'm like, okay, now we're going to turn up the actual heat, you know what I mean? So
yeah, dude. That's how it gotta be, man. I hate, like I said, I hate when people find out what rank I am because it's like, oh man, he's a brown belt or he's a black belt. They're gonna they're gonna destroy me. Like, no, man, let's just have fun. Let's go out here and just work. As long as you're not a douchebag, I won't do anything douchey. But if you started to like grind elbows and knees and stuff like that, then it's like, okay, now we gotta turn up now.
Yeah. So like when people ask me, so in the past, I usually say like, hey, I'm a purple belt, a brown belt, a black belt, right? And then I kind of ponder about this. It's like when I do that, one or two things would happen, right? One reaction I prefer than the other, but one reaction is they're gonna play really conceited and they're like very like very cautious, right? Prime example is like if it's a white belt rolling with me, when I say I'm a black belt, they're like, they don't go balls to the wall, right? One way. The other reaction, which I do prefer, is they go ballistic and they just go like they're trying to kill me, right? Which I prefer because I'm a competitor, right? And so nowadays, what I do is when people ask me what rank am I would say the first thing I would say to them is more like a Socratic questioning. Is like, does it really matter, right? Does it really matter?
Right.
I think you should say how many years I've been rolling, how many years I've been grappling. That's a more productive question to get a productive answer versus what belt are you? You know what I mean? I nowadays I hate when people ask me that. It's just like, you should just ask me how many years of grappling I've been rolling or been doing, and then go from there. Versus, what belt are you? How many? What Are you a black belt? Are you? It disgusts me when people ask me that. It's like, and I'm just a grappler, just like you. Albeit, like I might have done it more longer than you, but that's more viable, right? Time and experience versus some color on a belt. So
on a piece of fabric, right?
yeah, a piece of fabric.
I get it. Yeah, same here, man.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't matter what my belt rank is. We're down here. We're rolling. Let's get to work. That's simple.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. It ties in like when you're a white belt, it's like obviously you're not gonna buy like the white belt like clothing pack, right? Where it's like white shirt, white none of that. But then when you hit like blue belt, you want to buy everything like I got a blue belt, where it's like a blue belt shirt or whatever, right? But then as a black belt, I'm like, man, I just wear regular clothes, man. I don't want to be all like, oh, look at me, I'm a black belt, like all fancy smear. No, I just wear regular clothes. Like it's like, yeah, whatever, it's like the irony of it all. It's like at the beginning we're trying to we're soul searching for this thing, right? And then once we have it, we obtain that certain thing, we kind of flaunt it on our sleeves, on ourselves. But then as you get higher and more understanding and like being more humble, you're just like, I don't even matter, man. It's like whatever.
Yeah, no, that's not my case, dude. I still like to wear anything jiu-jitsu related, t-shirts, hoodies, and everything, dude. I don't know. It's like once I got to like blue belt, I was kind of like, okay, I see a couple, jiu-jitsu shirts I like, or I was kind of like making my own. But once I got to like purple, brown, dude, like my whole wardrobe was just strictly jiu-jitsu stuff. Everything was jiu-jitsu.
Well, I mean, like jiu-jitsu wise, like, I still wear jiu-jitsu stuff. I meant like flaunting your rank. That's what I meant, like specifically. I don't personally do that. I mean, obviously,
So yeah, no, I get it though. I get it, but I don't know, man. It's just like I've worked hard. I put so much time and energy into this, man. So it's like sometimes I just like to wear it proudly. That's all.
Yeah, I got you.
All right, Davis. So we have a staple here at Talk Your Jits podcast where we ask everybody that comes on the show, your top 3 people, no particular order. Who would you love to get a chance to roll with?
Top 3 people. All right. So it's going from number 3 to number 1. So number 3, I would love to roll with Hodger Gracie, right? Specifically in the gi, right? See, number 2, I would love to roll with I rolled with him before, but I would love to roll. Oh, actually, no. I would love to roll with Joseph Chen, right? Out of straight from B team. He, same seeing his mindset, his way of studying, like love the way, he rolls. I would love to roll with him. And then actually either Joseph Chen for number 2 or Gary Tonin. So those 2 tied for second. And then for number 1, definitely Gordon Ryan, even though he's way bigger and proven or unproven, he's on the sauce. But hey, I would love to roll with them. So,
I mean, as much people want to throw that up there, like, oh, he's juicing, he's this, he that. The dude's still very, very, very technical when it comes to jiu-jitsu.
Oh yeah.
Like, yeah, you
totally
can fake the muscles, but you can't fake skill. You can't fake the skill. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you can't.
So, all right, Davis, man, unless you got any other questions for me, if you got anything coming up you want the people to know about, let it, the floor is still yours. Shout out to your school and everything else.
Well, first I would like to shout out to my school legends with Professor Travis Moore, the people that are there, great people. You guys want to, in the Central Texas area, great place to train, right? We'll welcome everybody from all walks of life, all ranks, all school affiliations. And then for myself, follow me on my Instagram, Ashigarami92. I also have a YouTube page as well. I'm still in the works with that. Just follow me and watch my reels, learn some jiu-jitsu, those stuff I like to learn to do that actually works personally. And then finally, support me in my upcoming super fight is on the grappling, the combat sports coverage, right? It's going to be on Flow Grappling on January 27th. It's outside of San Antonio, and it's going to be in the cage. So if you have a Flow Grappling account, stay tuned. It's a Saturday on the day of the event, and just watch and come support me.
Awesome, sounds good, man. And good luck on your match. I think my instructor got Flow Grappling, so we'll probably go catch it with him. But yeah, good luck on your match, man, and good luck with everything that you got coming down the line for 2024.
All right, thank you.
Yep. All right, that's the end of today's episode. I would like to thank Davis one more time for coming on the show and blessing us with his jiu-jitsu knowledge. Hope everyone enjoyed. Please go and follow our Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube page just to stay up to date on all future episodes. This has been Talk Your Jits podcast. Keep rolling, keep grinding, and remember, long live jiu-jitsu. Have a great day.